Hey y'all, it's about 3:23 a.m. on Thursday, now September 11th, and yesterday was, in my opinion, one of the darkest days in our country's history. I promised myself I would never talk about politics when I started this channel, just because politics are so divisive that it doesn't have a place in this genre of the YouTubes. But I think what happened yesterday is probably the worst thing that's happened in this country since the assassination of President Kennedy. And that might be an atrocious statement to make. 9/11 happened, of course, that was horrific. Some could argue that we had a hand in fomenting that kind of hatred, and that's a discussion I'm not getting into at this point. One of the greatest things that I've learned through sailing is that I am not the main character. I suffered from main character syndrome most of my life. And, when you're faced with the naked aggression of Mother Nature and you're getting your ass handed to you 3 or 4 days in a row, you learn rather quickly that you're rather insignificant. I think living in the first world affords us the illusion that somehow each one of us is unique and special. And there are certainly unique and special people in the world, but I'm not one of them. I'm, in all effect, I'm just an NPC, and most of us are, and that's okay. We can't all, or we don't all, it is what it is. And I don't, so yesterday Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and I don't know a ton about Charlie Kirk. The videos that I've seen of him, I did appreciate, not because I agreed with what he was saying, just that I appreciated that he was willing to go to college campuses and speak to young people and debate them. And, Charlie was uneducated, but he was incredibly intelligent, and he always debated in a kind manner. And what has happened that we can't talk anymore to people? I don't understand why we can't just have a discussion. Why does it always have to devolve into hatred? When I suffered from delusions of grandeur, as it were, when someone would say something I didn't like, my response would be, well, that's not true. And that's a stupid response to have. Now, every time I read something or someone says something that I don't like, I ask the question, is that true? And that should be the only question that's ever asked. Is it true? Why is it that when people lose a debate or are confronted with ideas they don't like, their inclination is to shift to violence? If that's your inclination, then the paradigm that you've come up with for your life is just fucked up, and it's wrong. I always appreciated Charlie. I thought he engaged with people in good faith, and I thought that he was interested in the truth. And the same with Tucker Carlson. I listen to both sides. I listen to left, right. I'm not either one of them. Neither one of them agree with things that I agree with. Both sides have their faults. But two people that I feel like are genuine human beings who are interested in the truth, are interested in finding the truth. One of them was Charlie Kirk and one was Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is unhinged. He's just unhinged, and he says a lot of stupid shit. But one of the best interviews I ever heard was when Charlie was on Tucker's podcast, and Charlie was talking about the youth. He dealt with youth. He really had his thumbnail on the problems that our next generation are facing. And they're real problems. They're severe problems. And they're a problem of that my generation and my parents' generation created. It wasn't through any action of our own. We're just NPCs. My mom, my dad, my brother, and I, we're all NPCs. And for those that are not up on video game lingo, that's a non-player character. We're just not important people. We're just drones out here. We didn't have any hand in what's happened to our country. But our two generations sold out the future of this country by shipping all of our manufacturing overseas and by not enforcing our borders. As a result, home prices are through the roof. We don't make anything here anymore. And the next generation, my brother's kids, the people who are in high school now, they're screwed. They're facing at least a minimum of $80,000 worth of debt to get a degree that's going to get them a $25,000 a year job. How does that make sense? It doesn't make any damn sense. If I had a kid today, I'd tell them to go into the trades. They're going to make six figures, and they won't have any educational debt. But yet we degrade those. We look down on those jobs. But those are the jobs that we need. Unless you go to school to be a doctor or an engineer, there's no reason. There's absolutely no reason. Because you're not going to ever be able to pay off your bills. You're never going to be able to afford a house. You're going to be living in an apartment for your entire life. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I lived in an apartment my entire life until I bought my trailer home on the sea. My trailer home on the sea is the only house that I could ever have or own. And I had a $130,000 a year job. Now, could I have bought a house? Yeah, sure, I could have. But I'm not going to pay $600,000 for a house. I mean, when my parents bought their house, it was, what, $50,000, $60,000? And now it's $600,000? How in the hell can kids these days, and we sit back incredulous, my generation, my parents' generation, and we think, how in the hell can the youth of today think socialism is a good idea? Well, there you go. They're facing a corrupt government. They're facing a system that is set up for them to fail. They're losing their jobs to automation. Even if they go to college, they're going to be saddled with debt. They're going to get a job that pays them $25,000 to $30,000 a year. They're never going to pay off their college debt. They're never going to be able to afford a house, and they'll probably never be able to start a family. And what in the hell is that? And those are the things that Charlie Kirk was fighting for. He was fighting for the youth of this country. And I think that is extremely admirable. And I didn't agree with everything he said. Obviously not. No one agrees with any other human 100%. But when you can't debate someone, you should look at your ideas and either make them more solid, or, you know what, you might be wrong. No one is willing to admit that they're wrong anymore. No one is willing to debate anymore. They're just not. You can't have a conversation with anyone. I don't even talk anymore. I just keep my mouth shut. Because what's the point? People don't want to talk. They just are waiting for their turn to talk next. They don't give a shit about what you have to say. They don't listen to you. They're just worried about what they're going to say next. Charlie was 31, had 2 kids, two young children, and he was assassinated. Because he stood up for a younger generation, and he had conservative ideals. I hope this is a turning point, and that's not meant to be a pun, but to me this is darker than 9/11, which now conveniently it is. Not conveniently, which now factually it is. Assassinating a citizen because of their voice, the hubris and the self-centeredness, the narcissism of thinking that you can end another human being's life because of their ideas. I don't know. V for Vendetta looks like a lot more factual documentary nowadays than it does I don't even know what you'd call it. It's not a well, maybe, it's not really a superhero movie. A comic book movie, a graphic novel movie, I guess. But V for Vendetta seems to be becoming the new 1984. I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. I think I don't know. Anyway, this is the only time I'll ever talk about something like this because I can't imagine that anything, this is worse than, honestly, if Trump had been assassinated during his attempt, this to me is worse. This is a normal citizen exercising his right to free speech. And he gets murdered for it. Assassinated by a coward. Make it make sense.